Superior. All persons having anything to do before the Honorable Valerie Euratius, Justice Superior Court, now sitting and moving within and for the County of Middlesex, transaction of civil business. In the B session, thereof draw near, give your attendance, and you shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Please be seated. Court is now in session. Please make sure your cell phones are off. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning, Madam Clerk.
Your Honor, this is docket number 1881 CB 2385, City of Waltham versus the Trustees of the Stigmatine Fathers Incorporated. Could parties please all identify themselves for the record?
Attorney John Cervone for the City Solicitor for the City of Waltham.
Attorney Michelle Learned, also for the City of Waltham.
Good morning.
Jason Scopa for the defendant, Stigmatine Fathers.
Good morning.
And Peter Flynn, Your Honor, for the Stigmatine.
Good morning, and welcome back to all of you. All right, so would you like to go right back to the testimony, or is there anything to discuss first? I did see that there was a motion filed this morning. I have an opposition, I don't have the motion yet, but does it make sense at this point to just go forward with the testimony?
Yes, Your Honor, I'm sorry, you have an opposition?
I have, let's see.
Emergency motion for extension.
Let's see, well, it's regarding a summary judgment. I don't have the summary judgment itself.
Right,
So
right,
I
okay.
have the motion about enlargement of time,
Very
which
well.
we can deal with afterwards, if that's all right with you.
Excellent.
Okay, all right, let's do that, and let's just go directly to the testimony with us.
Defense calls Father Robert White.
Thank you.
You can write up your phone. Just raise your right hand. Thank
Do
you.
you solemnly swear the testimony you should give the court in the case now in hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Just follow me. Just make yourself comfortable. Just keep your voice up, though, okay?
Thank you.
And if you need to, you can adjust the mic any way you need to, Bob. Thank you.
Thanks.
And could you state your name for the record and spell your last name?
Robert White, W-H-I-T-E.
Thank you very much, Father.
And Father White, do you hold a particular position for the named defendant that is the Trustees of the Stigmatine Fathers, Inc.?
I'm the president of the corporation, the Stigmatine Fathers Incorporated, yes.
And what is the Stigmatine Fathers Incorporated, and how does it fall into, or how does it relate to the overall Catholic Church?
Well, the Stigmatine Fathers, Inc. are really, it's a legal entity for the state of Massachusetts. We're really talking about the Stigmatine Fathers as a religious congregation, similar to, analogous to other religious congregations, the Jesuits, the Franciscans, the Redemptorists, other religious communities like that. Religious communities in the Catholic Church serve in various capacities, in various ways, in ministry for the church. Obvious ones are in teaching or medicine or things like that, charitable activities. And the Stigmatine Fathers are one of those religious communities that carry out ministry for the church in specific ways.
Thank you. And given your position, what are your duties, and how, particular to the Waltham campus, if you could?
Well, I'm responsible for supervising the ministry and activities at the Espousal Retreat House in Waltham, and also for supervising the life and activity of the Stigmatine priests and brothers who live there.
I see. Now, keeping in mind that we heard yesterday a lot of detail about the campus, the buildings, and so on, but if you could briefly tell us what you have there in Waltham.
Well, there are 6 principal buildings plus a work shed or storage shed. There's the main retreat house.
What goes on there?
Retreats and other religious activities, for example, marriage preparation, which was one of the largest in New England. They also have preparation for the sacraments, confirmation. We have adult preparation. There's a prayer community that's there. There are women's groups that meet there. There are Alcoholics Anonymous groups that meet there. So there's a whole variety of activities.
And what's in the building facility-wise that you're able to accommodate groups like that?
Well, there's the main conference room, which holds, I believe, about 200 people. And correspondingly, there's the dining room that holds a similar number of people.
Cafeteria with the dining room?
You're right. The kitchen and the dining room. Then there are smaller breakout rooms and another smaller conference room about the size of this room here.
How many additional rooms in that building?
I think there are about 85 bedrooms, and breakout rooms, I think there are probably 4, plus there are 2 apartments, and I think that's everything.
And that's all just in that one building, the retreat house you call it?
Yes.
Okay, so, sorry, go on, tell us about the other buildings.
The other buildings is what we call the provincial house, which is like an administrative residence. We have offices, the financial offices downstairs and the counseling offices. There's a gift shop. Then attached to that, there is offices, my office, there's a conference room, and then up above there's residence.
Who lives
apartments.
there? Does someone live in that building?
I live there when I'm in Waltham, yes.
Anybody else?
Not right now.
Okay. And the other buildings, quickly, if you could?
Oh, I'm sorry. There's Bertoni Hall, which was the original building. It's the oldest building on the property. That used to be strictly a residence for the priests when it was a larger campus. Then there's St. Joseph's Hall, which was built as a retirement home for the priests, but it also includes other residents there now.
Each priest have his own living quarters in St. Joseph's Hall?
Yes.
You mentioned that you go back and forth, but you have living quarters there as well?
Yes.
Or you
At
keep
the
closed?
provincial office, at the provincial house. Yes.
Fair enough, but I mean on the property?
Yes.
Okay, and you keep your clothes there and so forth?
Yes.
Okay. And have you been able to tell us about all the buildings now? I think we may have left out one or two.
There's Chapel Hall, which is used as a meeting room, and then I think St. Anne's, which used to be the mission office for that administrated the foreign missions, and there's the fundraising office, and that sort of. There was a print shop there and all of that.
Who are the priests that consider Waltham campus their home right now?
Oh yes.
Who are they?
The priests in Waltham assigned to that community.
That live there?
Well, right, sustained us to this, but you can certainly ask it with the time frame that's going to be relevant to the decisions.
Fair enough. Is there any change now? Who lived there back in 2018 and are they still there?
Yes.
Tell us who they are, please.
Well, it's Father Paul Burns, Father David Gallagher, Father Gregory Hoppo, Antonio Lopez, who is a seminarian, a student. He's going to be ordained a deacon this year. There's Father Higgins assigned to that community, Father Azrak assigned to that community. I'm not sure if I named everybody.
And we'll get to the list that you provided in a little bit. Anybody else live there besides priests? Back in June and July of 2018?
And still, Maureen Harnedy, I'm not sure how to spell her last name, Harnedy. She's the the live-in caretaker for the retreat house.
And why do you have a live-in caretaker?
Well, we need somebody there to let people in and out after hours. Also to provide, she sets up all of the activities in the chapel and prepares for the masses that are there. She provides any assistance that people may need who are there for programs if they, need to be directed to where the pharmacy is or something like that. She provides that sort of help.
And how long has your order been at this location?
Can I add one thing to
Sure.
that? She's also the manager of the gift shop
I see.
down below. Okay. I'm sorry.
And you guys have been there almost 100 years, I understand?
Almost 100 years, yes.
Now, priests who live there, and again, I'm going back to the summer of 2018, are they there necessarily every single day?
No, they're out doing ministry.
Tell us about that.
Well, they do ministry, or they out for medical care, or they're away for vacation, or they're, doing other things. But they're assigned to that community. That's where they're accountable to, and where I have to account for them.
And where they reside.
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
And it's where they reside, by the way?
Yes.
Now, much has been made of a question, an answer that you provided earlier in discovery in this case. And I'm sure you know what I referred to. It's been marked as exhibit number 29. May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Father, you can take a look at this. Do you recall being asked during discovery how many priests were regularly there in June and July of 2018?
Yes.
And your answer was 3 to 4 in that 2-month period, correct?
Yes. Well, actually, I was thinking of that moment when I was asked.
Okay. How do you reconcile that with your testimony about about this being the residence of, sounds like about twice as many as that?
Well, because in a religious community like ours, each member has to be assigned to what we call a local community, all right? Now, the Espoused Retreat House is a local community for us. And so each member has to be assigned to that community where he's, he has a place where he can live, where he can eat, where he's supported from, where he can go out and do ministry from, or be taken care of in that way. And so I have to account, as does every religious superior analogous to me in other religions, has to account for their members every year in that way.
That
And
question.
if you look at the Kennedy Catholic Directory, which is the official directory of the Catholic Church in the United States, you'll see them listed there under the Spousal Retreat House, St. Joseph's Hall. You'll see them listed right there every year.
Fair to say the question that you were asked in exhibit number 29 didn't want that information, didn't ask for that information, did it?
I didn't take it that way.
You took it as how many were there at that point in time?
Yes.
Are you familiar with the letter that the mayor wrote? I believe it's marked as exhibit 19. She wrote a letter to the city council dated February 8th of 2017. It's in evidence. Father White, she says, as of that date, the census indicated that there were 8 residents at your Waltham campus. Does that sound correct to you?
Yes.
Okay. That's consistent with your memory?
Yes.
Consistent with your business records?
I would believe so, yes.
You actually keep a chart in the normal course of business, don't you?
Yes.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
It's normally a 2-page document. That's why it's normally down below. 2-sided.
You recognize this chart, Father White?
Yes, I do. I prepared it.
It's dated July 26th of 2018, which is a couple of days after the taking, correct?
That's correct.
Can you explain to us why, in the course of your business, you created this chart that day?
Well, excuse me. I was preparing for a series of meetings that my community has. Here in the United States, we meet twice a year. We call it an assembly, but it's basically a meeting of all of my confreres here in the United States. And besides that, we meet once a year with my counterparts from other parts of the world, in other parts of the world. So we have to provide each province, which is what we call the province, each province has to provide a list of all of the confreres, where they live, what their ministries are, what they're doing. So that's what this is. So I prepare this 3 times a year usually.
And for each priest, you have identified a quote-unquote community assignment on that chart.
That's
right?
correct.
What does that mean?
That means that's where they're responsible. There's a local superior who supervises their activities, reports to me what's going on. Naturally, I'm there every week to provide for their care and well-being and whatever they need, and to give them a base for ministry if that's what they're doing.
In layman's terms, is it their residence?
Yes.
Okay. Can I have that marked as an exhibit, Your Honor?
Is there any objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
What is the objection?
Well, he's already testified that he did it as a result of the taking.
No, that was not the
It-
testimony.
I believe he testified that he did it in the course of business as part of preparing for a series of meetings where people got together. I think he's laid the foundation for it to come in as a business record, so I'm going to overrule that objection.
Which is 30, I think.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Exhibit 30, so marked, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Is it okay if I staple this?
Yes.
Thank you.
Father White, is that the chart that you use to supplement your admission and elaborate on the number of priests that called it their residence in
Yes,
the
it
summer
is.
of the taking?
Yes, it is.
Now, we heard yesterday about the first meeting that you had with Mr. McParland. Were you here for his testimony?
Yes, I was.
He asked you for a list that day, he says. Did he?
My memory is not the same as Mr. McParland's on that.
What is your memory of the discussion you had, if any, with Mr. McParland that day with respect to who lived there?
He spoke to me about residents, who the residents are there. He didn't speak to me about living units or anything like that. He wanted to know who the residents were. And I went through with him verbally who the priests were who lived there, plus the seminarian, the student. I'm including him when I say the priest. So I went through those names with him.
Which is, he
He
denied.
didn't ask me for a list. I would have provided something like that probably if he had. He didn't ask me for any kinds of identification, as he mentioned yesterday, driver's licenses or anything like that. He just asked me for the names, who they were and what the number was.
Mr. McParland also mentioned that he called you prior to that meeting. Do you recall that telephone call?
Very well. He
Tell us
called
about it.
me several times. I was in the hospital, and he left me several voice messages. When I came out of the hospital, naturally, I had a lot of those voicemails. And I was listening to them the very day I came out, and his was one of them, and I knew this was an important matter for us, obviously. So I didn't want him to think I was trying to avoid him or be rude, and so I called him that day
When you got out of the hospital?
when I got out of the hospital, and I said to him, I apologized for not getting back to him because I was in the hospital, and I said I'd be happy to talk with him, but first I wanted to consult with our counsel, our attorney, before I did anything because I wasn't sure what the implications were of speaking with him would be. So that's what I did. After I hung up with him, I think it was, my next call was to Mr. Flynn, Peter Flynn, and he said to me that you should,
Well-
I'm sorry.
I just don't want to cross the line of your communications with your
Oh.
counsel, but shortly after that was the meeting arranged?
Yes,
And that's the meeting that you just told us about, when you
Yes.
recall giving him names, and he doesn't recall that.
that's right.
Shortly thereafter, you dug out the list that's now marked as Exhibit 30, and supplemented your discovery, correct?
That's correct.
And according to Exhibit 29, which has a certificate of service to Mr. McFarland's counsel, Mr. Cervone has had that for about 2 months now. Well, that withdrawn, but you can't speak to that. So, at the meeting, did Mr. McFarland say anything with respect to you, whether you should or could make efforts to find another place to go?
Well, he directly asked me that. He asked if the Stigmatines were looking for a property or some place to relocate. And I said to him, well, we weren't actively pursuing that because we didn't know what the outcome was going to be of this, or we didn't want to get involved in something else until this was kind of settled.
Meaning the city suing you?
That's correct. And he said, well, you better. Those were his exact words. You better.
We also heard some testimony yesterday, this may have been through Mr. Malika, that, and reference was made to a letter that is Exhibit 11, that you were offered a couple of alternative locations at some point, correct?
Yes.
Is that before Mr. McFarland ever called you?
Oh, long before. I don't think he was ever involved. In that.
So it wasn't part of the relocation plan?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mr. McFarland wasn't even around yet?
No.
In fact, if the Exhibit 11, which has a date of June 28, 2018, Mr. McFarland wasn't even approved to do this work yet, was he?
I don't believe so.
Okay. But nevertheless, do you remember going out to either location mentioned on Exhibit 11, and those are the Marquardt Building and the Fernald School?
Well, the Marquardt building is on the Fernald School property.
I'm sorry, the Fernald School, and the other one is what, St. Charles?
St. Charles. And I remember going with several people and with several representatives of the city. I don't know if I'm supposed to name who they were, but and viewing that building that they were offering to us, in my understanding, as a replacement for the retreat house.
Because they were going to take the property by eminent domain.
Correct.
Tell us about the trip to the Fernald School.
Well, they took us, we met at that property, and we had to be let in allowed in by a police officer because I guess it was under guard. And they brought us to this building that my understanding was that its last use was as I think a nursing home of some sort. And it was in kind of disrepair. It wasn't in the best of condition. And we went all through the building, and it really, wasn't suitable for our purposes. You can say the Prudential Center has the same square footage as Fenway Park, but you can't play baseball at the Prudential Center. And that's what this was. This was a building that didn't have a conference hall, a meeting hall, didn't have any breakout rooms, didn't have a dining room. It had a minimal kind of kitchen, all right? And it had several, I guess they must have been residence rooms that people were being cared for in the nursing facility there. Plus there were medical examining rooms and that sort of thing. But it was absolutely inadequate. They took us also suggesting that we could use what had served in the past as a chapel for the Fernald School. And they took us to that building, which was, I'm going to guess, I don't recall exactly, about 100 yards down a gravel pathway, roadway, to this building that had been a chapel, but it was absolutely been abandoned. They didn't have power. It was moldy. The carpeting was torn. The benches were all displaced. It was boarded up. It obviously hadn't been used in years. I don't know how we would be able to connect that with the other building to use it, but that was what their offer was there. The other suggestion was, I believe, the former rectory for St. Charles Parish in Waltham. And I called Father Michael Nolan when they had offered that. I called Father Michael Nolan, who is the pastor of St. Mary's, and he's also the administrator of St. Charles because they had merged the two parishes. So I called him to inquire about this, because certainly it would have been an intriguing offer, 10 supposed apartments or suites or rooms. And he led me to believe that there was some kind of mistake, because the former rectory of St. Charles had been already sold to a private party long before that, and I believe it's been developed or something into condominiums. The other building he talked about, this he said to me, was another building in great disrepair. He said the roof was, I'm quoting him, he said the roof was a sieve, the rest of the building was so dilapidated, the best thing to do would be to tear it down and start new. That was his description of the facility there. So that building obviously was not I'm sure the offer was sincere, but very inadequate.
Well, sincere or not, was either place suitable?
Absolutely not.
Was either place comparable?
Absolutely not.
Was either place even habitable?
No.
Since then, what have you been offered by way of relocation assistance?
Nothing until Mr. McParlin appeared on the scene.
I was going to talk to you a bit about access. I think we established through everybody else yesterday that you guys have been remarkably accommodating with respect to access since Judge Liu's order. So let me conclude with a couple of other things quickly, Father White. You're aware that one of the things that the city is looking for through this hearing is keys to every building on the premises, correct?
Yes.
What situation does that create for you and your colleagues?
Well, naturally, for the people who live there, it would be disruptive and disturbing to them, especially the older priests there. They're feeling a lot of insecurity right now, and that would, exacerbate that quite a bit. Also, I would be concerned about security. There are a lot of religious items there, chalices. How do we secure them and account for them with people coming and going into those buildings? The same is true in the gift shop. There are a lot of items in there. I don't know how we would be able to secure and supervise those and still be able to use them in any way.
Okay. And with respect to you mentioned the age of some of your colleagues. I know you're not a doctor, could you just quickly give us their ages and their conditions right now?
Well, I believe Father Gallagher is 88, 89. He needs a walker or a wheelchair to get around. He needs, the assistance of, we have a health aide there. He needs complete assistance for bathing and for all of that. He can't do any of that. He needs someone to supervise his medications. The nurses come in and do all that. Father Burns is the same way. His mobility is even worse. He's unable to walk at all. The other residents there, they come and go pretty well because they're involved in ministry, except for the two that in nursing homes right now, which I believe we had to move to the nursing home because they were so disturbed when this whole process began. It was very upsetting to them.
This began some time ago, right?
Yes.
You've been involved through the entire way?
Yes.
Fair to say that if we go back a couple of years, this started as a discussion about potentially selling the property to the city as opposed to them needing to take it.
That's correct.
Did any of the offers they made to buy the property rather than take it include leasing the property back to you for any period of time?
Yes. Yes, excuse me.
Was that offer made sometime in 2017?
I believe so.
And for how many years were they going to lease back the property to your religious order rent-free?
We talked about 5 years.
So that would have, if you signed it right there and then, they were okay with you being there through 2022.
Yes.
But we're here today and yesterday because they're telling this court that you guys need to leave immediately for this school to be built.
Apparently, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Fellow White,
Yes.
isn't it fair to say that you knew since 2015 that the particular property of 554 554 Lexington Street as an operating activity, business and residential, could not be financially maintained in that the priest would have to be relocated?
No, that's not correct.
Didn't you have communications back and forth between Atlantic Management that say basically that you acknowledged that sometime in the near future, you would be having to move the people out of St. Joseph's and you would be finding another either nursing home or place of residence for the people who were living there?
In 2015 with me, I don't believe so, no. That
2015
was-
through 16.
Atlantic Management was initially engaged to help us manage the property better, to manage it more efficiently. And they made a number of recommendations that we've tried to follow. We did discuss with them the stress on our finances of maintaining the property, which is correct. We did not commit to moving in any way. We were also, at the same time, speaking with some of my confrères in other countries to transfer some of their members here to supplement that ministry there. And some of that has taken place, and there are plans for more of that in the future, next year.
Isn't it true that you hired Atlantic Management to sell the property?
Not true.
To a resident? Did you sign a written exclusive sales agency agreement with Atlantic Management?
We signed an agreement with them, yes.
And it was to sell the property, correct? There's a commission attached to selling the property, correct?
That was not my intent, no.
So that's your signature on the document, but you're saying it wasn't your intent?
That's right. My,
Okay.
can I?
The document to be shown to one, please.
Well, you'll be getting to all of those. He answered the question.
Okay, we were asking if it's a signature on it, and he's not holding it, I mean.
If you'd like to ask another question, you can ask another question, and then what happens is your own attorney will be able to ask you any questions he wants when he does redirect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Isn't it true that the reason that there was discussion with your counsel about various offers between the city and the Stigmatines? Do you remember that testimony?
Yes.
Isn't it true the real reason is because you didn't feel the city of Waltham was paying enough money to purchase the property?
I believe that then, and I believe it now.
So that's the real reason why you're not proceeding to take any action to look for anything else, isn't it?
No.
Isn't it true that you feel that the property, the city should pay more just because once you found out they needed it for a school, you felt it was worth more?
Absolutely not.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Is your email address rsw7713@aol.com?
Yes.
Did you send out this email?
All right, this is an email to his attorney.
No, it's to many more people than just his attorney, Your Honor.
Are there other people on there?
There are a couple of names CC.
Okay, all right, and those are not attorneys?
Those are Atlantic, well, can I ask who they are? Atlantic Management.
Okay.
Isn't that what you said in that email to the Atlantic Management people and Attorney Patton about the offer?
I'm sorry, what was your question? I was reading this, I'm sorry.
Yes, okay. So you had indicated that you had never said before that you didn't believe that the city should pay more once you found out that they needed it for a high school, correct?
That's correct.
But that isn't what that letter says, is it?
Well, I came to realize that the property was more valuable, yes.
Can I offer this, Your Honor?
Is there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, being marked.
Exhibit number 31, so marked, Your Honor.
Thank you.
You were also aware, Father White, that the city of Waltham had previously acquired 2 properties that immediately abut your property at 554 Lexington Street, correct?
I became aware of that, I don't remember when, but I did become aware of it, yes.
And weren't you also aware that the city of Waltham had long before 2016 listed the property of the Stigmatines as one for intended acquisition pursuant to its master plan?
I didn't know that until we began this whole process. I didn't know that, no. We were never notified of that. I was never notified of
When you
that.
say you didn't know about it till we began this process, what do you mean by that? You mean this lawsuit?
No, I mean the whole eminent domain taking process that we've been going through. That came out as part of the information, but I was not aware of that.
Were you involved in all of the information that Atlantic Management was sharing with you and your attorneys about its marketing plan to developers?
I would think so, yes.
And isn't it true that you were aware of the fact that the city had listed this property in its master plan before the eminent domain process, as you referred to it?
Well, I wasn't aware of it then. I did become aware of it as we entered into this eminent domain process, yes. I didn't know, I wasn't aware of anything what the city was doing as far as land acquisition.
But weren't you told about those before the eminent domain process?
Exactly when it was right around this, all the same time.
Okay. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Does it refresh your memory now that it was as early as May of 2016 that you were told that the city had acquired 2 abutting parcels and had, years before 2016, identified the property of the Stigmatines as one for prospective acquisition by the city as part of the master plan?
That's consistent with what I just said, yes. I learned about it at this time. I didn't know about it when the city had done it, whenever they had done it. No, I
Objection,
didn't
Your
know
Honor.
that.
We're in
Just one
2000.
moment, just one moment. All right.
I'm trying to find the relevance. We're in 2016 about what the city was doing with different properties. We're supposed to be here on Judge Lou's order.
Okay. All right, so let's move on and ask the next question.
May I just offer this, Your Honor?
Yes, is there any objection to that?
Yes, for the same reason.
Yes, yes, please. I'm going to overrule the objection, that can be marked in evidence. Thank you.
Exhibit 32, so marked, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Would you like that back, Attorney?
No, that's fine. Thank you. Isn't it true that before the process involving the city of Waltham that was discussed by your attorney started, that your plan was to move to a different retirement home and that the future proceeds of the sale of 554 Lexington Street to a 40B developer was going to be used for funding some sort of a foundation?
That was one of the alternatives discussed, yes.
So you knew back in 2015 and planned on relocating the priest who were residing in St. Joseph's Hall?
Objection, Your Honor. I believe you said we're going to move on from this.
You can have this one question. I do believe that because you want the topic of relocation included, and I allowed this hearing to include relocation at your request, that's why I'm allowing
Fair
the
enough.
other side to go to this.
Fair enough.
And counsel, you may just want to move the microphone away because it's picking up what you're saying. Thanks.
I'd like to offer this, Your Honor.
No objection.
Thank you. It may be admitted and marked.
What is the date on that, please?
The date is April 27th, 2015.
Thank you.
Thank you. Exhibit 33, so marked, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Do you remember having the knowledge between 2015 and 2017 that the operation of the Stigmatines at 554 Lexington Street was not sustainable on a financial and other bases?
Yes.
So you knew you were going to have to be relocating the people who lived there to a different site?
No. There were other alternatives that could be considered, and which we did. We looked at a number of other alternatives.
Were the alternatives only involving remaining on the site that you're referring to?
Remaining there, increasing the activities there, finding new sources of revenues for there. Yes, there were all kinds of different possibilities explored and discussed.
And that hasn't happened, though, that you've gotten more revenue or more financial income at that site, has it?
Well, because this whole process has been devastating to the ministry there.
Well, you closed down Bertoni Hall long before this process
correct.
started, correct? And St. Anne's Hall was closed long before this process started with the city, correct?
As I said, that was at the advice of Atlantic Management to manage the property more efficiently, yes.
Right, that is, you had to go along with those decisions, didn't you?
I'm sorry?
You had to go along with those decisions, didn't you, Father?
Yeah, I guess.
And do you remember being here when we had a hearing with Judge Liu, and there was discussion about whether there were sufficient assets and locations of other property within the Commonwealth that the Stigmatines had so that there didn't need to be any deposit in court of the pro tanto offer?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite.
Okay. Do you remember during that hearing around the issue of the request to deposit in court the pro tanto offer as security for the possibility of the interference with the MSBA loan, that the court was told that you had many other properties in Massachusetts, including a large property in Springfield?
Is this at the hearing with Judge Liu?
Yes.
I was not present.
Oh, you weren't, okay. Is it true that you have a significant property in Springfield?
In Chester, which is nearby Springfield.
How about Belchertown? You have property there too, correct?
We did, we don't have it now, no.
Was that sold,
Oh, yes,
all of it?
yes.
Going back to something that was said about Mr. McFarland and directing your attention to that, the meeting that you were talking about with your attorney occurred in February of 2018? Excuse me, February of 2019?
I just don't recall the dates, I'm sorry.
Was it in the winter of 2019?
Probably, yeah, I just don't recall.
And would it be fair to say, when you were characterizing what you remember of Mr. McFarland's conversation, that he was focusing on a particular date of July 23rd, 2018, when he was asking you about who lived there?
Yes.
Correct. And you were telling him about the people who, in your interpretation, lived there in the winter of 2019, correct?
Well, I think we may have talked about both. He was asking me about that earlier date, and then we were talking about the actual situation then.
Correct.
But
But you never gave him the names of just the people who were living there July 23rd, 2018, did you?
a written list, no.
Did you give him the names orally?
Yes, we went through the names.
I'm not talking about the names that you just talked about with your attorney. Did you ever identify specifically the 3 to 4 priests who, in your answers to admissions, you said were living at the site on July 23rd, 2018?
I must have. I just don't recall specifically that issue.
And I think you testified that you haven't been actively looking for any place to relocate any of your people who are living on the property or any of the businesses since the taking. Is that correct?
No, I don't know if I said that. Let me be accurate. Up until the meeting with Mr. McFarland, we had not been.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah, up until then, no, we had not been.
Is it fair to say that, sorry, when you talked about your visit to the Fernald State School and the tours that you took through the building, isn't it fair to say that the mayor told you that the city would be fixing or renovating or whatever needed to be done if you were willing to take that as one of the relocation sites?
She certainly did talk about renovating, yes.
And she said the same thing about the chapel too, correct?
Yes.
And the discussion or answers you had with your attorney about terms of remaining on site were just one of a number of terms in the offer, correct?
I believe so, yes.
And so it comes back to, really, would it be fair to say that your initial position and assumption had been you were going to be selling the property to a 40B developer for more money than the city was offering?
Just object to form on initial assumption where that is.
Yes, could you reword the question, please?
Thank you. Isn't it true that the reason that you have, despite the negotiation agreements that were signed, you have not proceeded because you believe, as indicated in the exhibit that was marked, that you will get more money from a 40B apartment developer?
That's certainly a possibility, I guess.
Well, wasn't that the plan?
No.
Wasn't. Do you remember giving an interview to the Boston Globe within a couple of days of the taking being reported?
Yes.
And isn't it true that you told him that there were only 15 Stigmatine priests in the entire United States?
Yes.
And you also told him that there were 4 priests living in Waltham
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
And is it fair to say that the names of all these other people that have been discussed with your attorney were people that were brought in after the fact?
When you say the names of the priests?
Yes.
No.
So even
Brought in
though-
after the fact of what?
after the fact of the taking and your July interview with the Boston Globe.
No, those priests had always been assigned there.
But you only said 3 or 4 were living there. Is that correct? I see you nodding your head, but I don't.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, yes.
We need to know oral, thank you. So let's get to you keep parsing out the term assigned as opposed to live. Would it be fair to say that the people who are assigned to 554 Lexington Street are assigned there because the Stigmatine order in America lists 554 Lexington Street as its only central location?
Yes.
So in fact, those people don't live there in the sense of permanently living physically in the buildings of 554 Main Street, excuse me, 554 Lexington Street, I apologize. Most of the days of the week during June to July of 2018, did they?
Probably not.
And is it fair to say that, for example, you and Father Corrigiano don't live there at 554 Lexington Street?
I don't think I've identified myself as living there. Or Father Coriano, if I recall.
And are you registered to vote?
I'm sorry?
Are you registered to vote?
Oh, yes.
And you know when you register to vote, you have to sign a certification, a statement about where you actually live physically and reside.
Yes.
So, is it fair to say that Father Ferrecchia and Father Scioli are not registered to vote in Waltham because they don't live there, correct?
I would assume so. I don't know if they're registered to vote at all, so
Well, they're living in Milford on East Main Street, correct?
yes.
And would it be fair to say that Father Deeker doesn't live in Waltham either?
Well, that is his community of assignment. He helps out at Pittsfield, yes, but he keeps all of his things there in Waltham, you know.
And I know you're coming back to the term assignment,
Yes.
and I understand that from your purposes as, and I understand the term or title that you have as provincial,
Yes.
so you can technically assign people to have a home base at the offices at 554 Lexington Street in Waltham, but they don't necessarily spend their living and sleeping time on that particular property.
Not all the time.
In fact, not most of the time, correct?
It depends on who we're talking about, that's all.
Well, let's go back to Father Deeker. Isn't it true that he's registered to vote at 414 North Street, Pittsfield?
I'll take your word for that, I don't know.
Can I approach, see if this refreshes his memory?
Well, I don't think he would know about somebody's voting status. But you can ask him directly about where he spends his time.
Would it be fair to say that Father Deeker doesn't spend most of his time during the period, June to July of 2018, actually sleeping and residing most days of the week in Waltham?
That's probably correct, yes.
And would it be fair to say that for, other than 3 or 4 priests that you mentioned in your request for admission during that time period, June to July of 2018, and understanding that you say that you assign them for your ordinance business purposes to 554 Lexington Street, isn't it fair to say that those other priests on the list, other than the 3 to 4 that you talked about in your statements to the Globe, do not spend most of their physical sleeping and living time at 554 Main Street during that June to July 2018 time?
Yes, because they're probably out involved in ministry and other activities.
Right, and the ministry and other activities are not in Waltham.
Correct.
Do you remember reviewing? Strike that, please. You were aware that an apartment developer had offered $18 million for your property at 554 Lexington Street, Waltham, correct?
I just don't recall that. I'm sorry.
You don't recall Atlantic Management speaking to you about strike that. You don't recall Atlantic Management advising you in writing, in an email, that they had already had an apartment developer who had already developed a property in Waltham at the Ridge, who had made an oral $18 million offer for your property?
Objection, Your Honor. Same as the
Sustained.
previous, I think.
Yeah, sustained. You don't need to answer that.
You were aware that different apartment developers were up on your property at 554 Lexington Street, Waltham, conducting various surveys and tests during the period of time just before and just after you signed the exclusive sales listing agreement with Atlantic Management, correct?
Same objection.
Is this related to relocation? Is that the purpose that you're
Yes.
asking for this evidence? I'll allow it in for that purpose.
I'm sorry, I don't recall the details of those things. I know things like that happen, but I just don't recall specific details of dates or what they actually did or things like that.
Okay, I'm not asking for specific details.
Yeah.
I'm just asking, you were aware that a number of developers were conducting various tests and surveys on the property of 554 Lexington Street, Waltham, between 2015 and 2016, correct?
I know there were developers who were interested. I don't know exactly what they did with tests or surveys or measurements. I'm sorry.
Well, you had to give them permission to come on the property, correct?
But probably, yes.
And do you remember hearing the name Avalon Bay being one of them?
Yes.
And in fact, there was a written offer that you saw relating to Avalon Bay for your property, correct?
Yes.
And did you review that with Atlantic Management?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you review that at multiple times or at any time with Atlantic Management?
We certainly must have discussed it with Atlantic Management, yes.
And as part of those terms, you knew that you would be eventually, after selling to any of those developers, relocating the people who you had on the property of 554 Lexington Street.
If we decided to accept that alternative, yes.
Which offer was, or memorandum of understanding, or any kind of tentative agreement was signed by the trustees of the Stigmatines Fathers, Inc., relating to these developers?
Memorandum of agreement?
Yeah, whatever you want. Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. I don't recall signing anything. I may have, but I just don't recall. We didn't agree to any specific offer, I know that.
Do you remember being involved in reviewing memoranda relating to the sale, or potential sale of the property at 554 Lexington Street?
I don't know what, I probably did, I just don't know what we're referring to.
In fact, do you remember getting specifically involved in suggesting corrections or changes to terms and conditions?
I don't recall.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Does this refresh your memory that you were directly involved in making suggestions and changes and corrections to memos?
Oh, yes, okay. Yes, okay.
So it does refresh your memory that you were
Yes.
directly involved in the process of negotiations for the sale of the property, potentially.
Yes.
Thank you.
Got that.
And going back to something that was discussed before, isn't it fair to say that your original goal was always to sell to a third-party developer?
No.
And isn't it fair to say that in addition to the fact that you believe that the city should be willing to pay more because they need it for the high school, that you were motivated not to be cooperative with the city because your plan was to always sell to a third-party developer?
No.
Just one moment, I've got it, sure, just one moment. We have to have enough time in between a question
Sorry.
and an objection in order for me to rule, and then you can decide whether to answer. So I do want to keep the record straight on this one, so could I hear the question one more time?
Yes, sir. Isn't it true, going back to one of the other exhibits that's in evidence now, that you always had planned on selling to a third-party developer?
Are you objecting to that question as it's been phrased or not?
Yes, Your Honor, I just don't see the relevance of getting into private negotiations of a purchase and sale agreement that never came to fruition.
And I'm not going to accept any answer for the relevance of the things that you mentioned. I'm only going to be considering it for the issue of relocation for whatever rate is for it. So for that, I will allow you to answer.
No.
An approach, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Do you remember being part of that statement?
Object to form. This is an email not written by the witness.
Okay. All right, could you?
Yes, sir.
That'll be sustained.
You indicated that you were regularly involved with Atlantic Management during the process of marketing for sale the property at 554 Lexington Street, correct?
Yes.
And isn't it fair to say that your original plan and intent was always to sell to a third-party developer?
In my mind, no.
Did you review the
Yeah.
email that was just attached?
This may have been using Atlantic Management's vision of the goal of selling to a third party. My intent from the very beginning was to try to understand what the value of the property was. Because we had been told on many, many occasions, your property is worth this, it's worth that, you should do this, you should do that. Develop it in part, sell it in part. We had all kinds of advice from many different kinds of people. And so I thought the simplest way to try and determine the value of the property was to see what it would bring on the open market. We did not commit to selling the property to anybody. It was just a simple attempt to determine the value. That was always in my mind. That was my purpose.
Well, isn't it true? It's maybe simpler is to have an appraisal of the property?
Yeah, we could have done that.
In fact, you did have an appraisal done of the property, didn't you?
Eventually, yes.
And you're saying that that's not simpler to find out the value of the property than going through a 2-year marketing campaign and having developers come and do testing on the site for their development?
I don't know. I'm not in that kind of business. I'm sorry.
But you were regularly involved in meeting and cooperating with your exclusive sales agent in how to market the property, correct?
No, I wasn't directing them, I don't think.
Oh, no, that was, I apologize. I didn't say directly, I don't think, but I'll ask it again. Were you involved during the process of how your property was being marketed in the sense of speaking with, meeting with, sharing emails with Atlantic management during the process in which it was being marketed to independent developers?
Probably, yes.
And this document that I just showed you is part of that process of dealing with your exclusive sales agent.
It's the same one we
It's
just...
the same one, yeah.
Yeah, right, okay.
Could I have additional?
Yes, any objection to that?
Not for the limited purpose that Your Honor has outlined.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you.
Exhibit 34, so marked, Your Honor.
And you knew that if these developers were coming in to build large apartment developments, that you would be eventually relocating from the site.
If that was the alternative, we accepted, yes.
Let me see if this refreshes your memory. I'm going to go back to one other thing. When you, strike that, please. Do you remember discussing with Atlantic Management, one of the developers who made an offer had previously done an apartment development in another part of town in Waltham?
I'm sorry, I do not recall specifically that, no.
Does Lincoln Property refresh your memory?
Yes, I remember that name, yes.
Is that the name that was associated with the $18 million offer?
With what offer? The $18 million offer?
Yes.
It may have been, I just don't recall.
And do you remember what the, strike that please. Do you remember reviewing an offer that was based on a certain price per unit of apartments that was eventually going to be proposed for your property?
I may have, yes.
And does the number 53,300 per unit,
I just don't recall, I'm sorry.
do you remember such an offer being made by Avalon Bay in a 3-page proposal?
Yes.
And was there a different, do you remember what the total was on that price, assuming a certain number of units?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained. I think you have made your point about relocation.
Yes. Thank you. Sorry, Arnold.
Proceeds of the third.
I apologize, it's one that's not on our list, Exhibit 30, could I just see what that?
Oh, here it is.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So going back to your testimony, Father, about, I think it was St. Joseph's Hall, you said had a large kitchen and a dining area, correct?
Yes. St. Joseph's Hall, you said.
St. Yes. And you mentioned something about two of the priest residents there needing, having trouble getting around and one needing total care. Is that are you licensed as a?
In terms of walking,
Yes.
he had to be either in a wheelchair or assisted walking.
Right.
Yes.
Is that facility licensed to provide extended care or nursing home?
No.
And you mentioned that there's someone, you mentioned an aide.
Yes.
Who is that? Is that Joe Desir?
Yes.
Does he have any kind of licensing as a LPN or RN or anything like that?
No, but we do have the visiting nurses come in and, they give him advice on what to do.
And what
But he's not providing any medical care per se. He's just
No,
helping them.
I understand. The visiting nurses that do come in, where are they from? Which?
I'm not sure.
And so, obviously, if they're at that level of care, they're not taking care of their own meals and things like that, are they?
That's correct.
So they're just, someone is preparing their meals in the one large kitchen, and you said there's a large dining area, correct?
Yes.
And does Mr. Desir take care of preparing the meals in the communal kitchen?
Oh, no, we have a cook for that.
But everyone gets their meals and from this one kitchen facility, the central cook.
Yes.
And no further questions.
Okay, if it's all right with council, what I'd like to do is ask a few questions of my own to the witness, and then that way, if you'd like to go back into anything on redirect or recross, that'll be fine. Is that all right with you?
Yes, Your Honor, I don't think I have any.
Okay, thank you. Is that all right with you?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
Fine.
All right. We heard yesterday some testimony about services that happen at a chapel, and I just want to understand, is that chapel hall where the services happen?
Well, there are 3 chapels on the property where these things could happen. Chapel Hall, so named because it was specifically a chapel at one time. It's more a multi-purpose area. The religious services would take place now either in the retreat house itself. We have a very large chapel there, or at St. Joseph's Hall, which accommodates probably 30 people. The other one would be well over 200.
Okay. And I'm also just thinking about making sure that none of the testing comes in to disrupt any of the services there. So do the services happen at one of the 3 chapels? The religious services?
Yes.
Okay, all right. And are there regular times for those services?
At St. Joseph's Hall, yes.
Okay, what is that, please?
Well, they have mass at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then they have a daily prayer time, usually in the afternoon around 4 o'clock, and then they use it for their own private meditation and prayer.
Okay, all right. All right, and let's see. Could you explain who determines where the members of your religious community will live and how you make that determination?
I determine it, and it's based on their availability and the kind of ministry they're able to provide, or the the physical health and care that they may need.
Okay. All right, and in terms of the access that's been going on so far in the last several months, with people coming onto the property, what's your perception of how that's worked or not worked?
I thought it's worked fairly well. We have to provide someone to take them through the different buildings, some of the, you know, so that's a little inconvenient for us in that sense, but I've heard no significant complaints back from that.
Okay, all right, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to ask any further questions?
No, very much.
Okay, all right, thank you. You may step down. Thank you very much.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, I don't feel the need for any type of closing because we've already had a hearing on this. If any party strongly would like to have one, I will let you do it. But I do feel like I have enough evidence to make the decisions that are limited to the issues that we've set out before us now. Would you like to be heard, Attorney Flynn?
Yes, Your Honor. I'll be very brief on this. I hear you loud and clear in what you're saying. One of the things, I think you're pretty satisfied with the way the inspections have been going on. But one of the things I would mention to Your Honor is that there is nothing. Once you go to eminent domain, if you take everything from 2015, 16, 17, up until April or May of 2018, that's the only time that matters because the city went over the Rubicon at that point. They changed everything. They said, we're going to go to the draconian measure here. We're going to take by eminent domain. So whatever happened after that doesn't mean anything in the scheme of things. So everything that was going on before that, the city interested in the property, Father White concerned about the value of it, the city may want it, private developers, it doesn't mean anything. But as of May 15th of 2018, Your Honor, once the city moved into the real world of eminent domain, they were locked in at that point, okay? And the first thing they had to do in May 15th, May before the June hearing where they approved it by the city council, they had to quickly address the issue of relocation. They did not do that in May or June. So there they go, up in front of the city council, and they go to eminent domain and get approval in June to take the property with no talk or any relocation plan in place. And what do they do from there? They go right over to the date of the taking, July 23rd, and at that point, had they taken any corrective measures with respect to the eminent domain process, which they've already said they're voting for it, they're going to take it? Did they address relocation on a formal basis at that point? No, they did not, Your Honor. Now, that is a key time, Your Honor, and because, as you know, in the eminent domain situation, the landowner has no choices here. All bets are off. We've been there for 100 years. Father White has always maintained he wanted to stay there, but he's got all these forces coming at him on a 46-acre parcel. So what you basically have is surgical precision is now required by the city once they go to eminent domain. No more discussion, no more talking about what were you thinking about here and there. Let's everybody line up our ducks properly and let's get going. And you know what happens? They made the taking, Your Honor, on July 23rd, and for the first time in my career, I was told we weren't going to be paid the pro tanto. I could not believe it. I went down to get the pro tanto and was told the city is suing us. Suing us, the landowners. I've never seen that in my 40 years either. So anyway, after that transpires, we then quickly move to the point where they're saying, okay, we got problems here now, so we better hire a relocation expert. And they do, and they get Mike McParlin. He finally gets qualified after the date of taking. And that is tragic, but at least it's a step in the right direction. And at the end of my presentation, Your Honor, I think I'm going to give a good suggestion to the court. I hope it will resonate. So, relocation, Your Honor, in an eminent domain case is the controlling factor in eminent domain. If there are people present on the property, if there are dwelling units, And I have to tell you, at the point in time, at the end of August, when we're being told we're not gonna get the pro tanto, and we end up in front of Judge Lou on all these issues, remember, we are not challenging the validity of this taking. They sued us. They wouldn't give us the pro tanto. They sued us. And here we are in front of you with no relocation. What it is, Your Honor, is a flawed process. And where we stand now is that the city relocation expert has started his relocation process. Your Honor, when he testified, Mr. McFarland testified, he's been on board since August 30th. He says we've been letting him come in. We've told him, if you want to talk to me, to Father White, anyone you want to talk to. And what does he say on his direct in front of you, Your Honor? He's been on it for now 9 months. And we're saying, Mike, what's going on here? Well, I got other matters that I have to attend to. So what it is, it's a relocation process that's out of sync. And I have to tell you, Your Honor, that controls everything. Relocation tells us how much it's going to cost. Your Honor, there are millions of dollars in personal property on that site that have to be removed. There are statues, tabernacles, all that stuff is going with the Stigmatines. And even if it doesn't go to a site, it has to be put in storage somewhere. And that involves a massive, and he's been doing the inventory by his own admission now for more than 7 or 8 months. And I can tell you, Your Honor, he has informed us that he says he'd be finished with his relocation sometime in June. So all this time, we've accommodated him, and we don't have a single page of relocation in the formal sense or informal sense from the city. And I don't have the informal stuff they talked about on relocation doesn't mean anything at all. Here they are being confronted. You got developers, the city wants the property, everybody wants the property. Father White says, what's it worth? He gets a group to find out what it's worth. And now here we are. And what I'm saying is you gotta draw the line. Forget about that. Once you go to make the taking, you're gonna throw these people off the property. You're gonna take their property that they've had for 100 years. So please do it right. Do the relocation so we know how much it's gonna cost, where the priest's gonna go, and let's get with the program. And, you know, on the numbers, you've heard plenty about the numbers, Your Honor. You got the census from the mayor telling us there were 8 there, writing to Father White. You've heard Father White talking about them there. And of course, Your Honor, the number of priests involved. You also have to add the number of the business component, which is at least 3, as you heard from Mr. Mollica. I'd suggest that puts it over 10. And then you got Maureen Haney up at the retreat center. I don't think there's any issue about that. Now, I'm almost done, Your Honor. If they're displaced, we don't even know what the project, we know this project really isn't going to get rolled to 2022. But if they're displaced, that spells utter chaos. Because what you have is city officials, consultants, trespassers, public, all going on to the vacated property. Now, all of that personal stuff would still be there. All of that very expensive stuff would all be still present on the property. And that would be very dangerous because what it could precipitate, Your Honor, is a order from the Relocation Bureau, if they get involved, and they may, to temporarily remove the priests and everybody there. That'll be one relocation expense for the city. We will then have to appeal it because we have nowhere else to go. We have no place to go. We have no one moving our stuff, no one giving us the money to move it. And there we are. So then they'd have to pay to move us back if we went on an appeal, if we're improperly displaced without a relocation program in place. Then that's 2, and then they'd have to move us out completely, maybe a year or 2 down the road. And then that's the big expense, which is when they take all of the personal equipment, all the stuff that the ministry does, all the statutes on the property, everything will have to be moved. There's going to have to be a day of reckoning on this relocation issue. And what I'm trying to do, and now I've cut out most of everything I have here, Your Honor, but I mean, Mike McFarland's been there for 9 months. We haven't got a single page from him. And he's been told, come see us. We'll give you the names of the priests. We'll do this, we'll do that. He hasn't asked to go back on that issue. So you must be saying to yourself, after 9 months, Mr. McFarland, why aren't you coming to Flynn? Father White. The reason is, every time he comes, I say, Mike, we'll be there, whatever you want. And then he tells you, oh, well, I got other matters to do. Lurking in that is, what in God's name are they doing with an out-of-sync relocation? Please get going. So, here's my suggestion. I don't want a career of this case of relocation and eminent domain, everybody involved in this. So let me make this suggestion, see if it makes any sense. I don't want to get into appeals and these multiple displacements, and then we may have to file in another area. I really don't want to do that. I'm wondering if there's any possibility, and of course you're going to call this as you're leaving on your vacation. What about the idea of saying, yeah, there's a relocation issue here, for sure. So why don't we do this? Since it's the obligation of the city on relocation, whether or not it's one person, 2, 6, 10, 12. Why don't we say, let's get McParlin underway. We got Steve Mollica to review whatever he's going to do, and let's table the relocation until mid-August. And then you drag us all back in here and say, hey, I heard all you killing each other over this relocation issue. Where are you now, city? Now that you've been in it for about a year, what are you doing on relocation? That way, a negative displacement or an ill-timed displacement on us would be, and I'm not suggesting you're going to do that anyway, I'm just hoping to avoid that. I'm just saying, why don't we, from my perspective, call the city's bluff. Say, listen, you got my pal in there? We'll see you in August. You better have something solid. Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, yes, I'll hear from
I have to, Your Honor. This 760 CMR subsection 2704 program requirements. Again, and I'll preface it by this, I think Your Honor may have asked the same question. Judge Liu asked this question. There is not a case, there's not a single case that supports the interpretation that Attorney Flynn is trying to propose now that says that they can proceed without going to the Bureau of Relocation. They have to exhaust their administrative remedies. And the real reason is because, as I was just talking about in 760 CMR 2704, it says that all we have to do is offer one comparable place of relocation. And it requires businesses as well as residents to participate and take some initiative to find something comparable. They've had the same year with $18 million in their pocket, and as I heard the testimony, as opposed to Attorney Flynn's testimony, the testimony said they really haven't done anything because they really want more money for the taking is what it comes down to. And going back to the jurisdictional prerequisites, 78, 79A, 7B is very clear. The Bureau of Relocation is the exclusive forum for them to bring all of their grievances. And the reason they don't want to do it is because it's only money damages. What they're trying to do is ignore, they invoke 79A, but they want to ignore the parts that say, oh yeah, you can be paid. We'd be happy if it's just paying for the cost of moving, etc. That probably won't be the problem. Problem is, they're refusing to go until they get a bigger price. And again, going to the as I think even their witness conceded, they have to have 6 or more units, not people. And it was pretty clear that St. Joseph's Hall is 1 unit, and even when you count up Provincial House, it's one business with 1 caretaker, but even if you want to separate, the caretaker is separate from the business of the, the espousal center. Now you're up to 3. Provincial House is 4. They don't reach the 6, which is the 79A Section 4 jurisdictional requirement. And if they don't reach the 6, there's no need for a plan at all. This is a red herring to try to delay for reasons that really have to do with the amount of money that they want. They're trying, rather than
They know what the cost of delay is. And just as that document written by Father White says, they think because the city wants it for a school, they should get more money simply for that reason. None of their, and I, again, if Attorney Flynn is testifying, I should be allowed to show multiple notices relating to relocation that were sent July, August, September. They've never wanted, their position has always been, as is indicated in admission number 22, they've never considered leaving the site. That's why they should be stopped from claiming relocation. They've never been willing to participate in it. They have to provide the information and the raw data in order for us to do that. That's why, as Mr. McParland testified, it's been so difficult. They know exactly how to sabotage the process, and that's all this is about. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. All right, I would like to thank both sides for your professionalism. I know that this issue is very important to both sides, and I appreciate the high level of professionalism that you conducted yourself with, particularly over the last 2 days. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for getting your witnesses here and submitting all the evidence. Let me tell you what I'd like to propose about some procedural steps for
If I may, Your Honor, I'm sorry, just a point of stipulation, maybe stipulation is the wrong word. I just don't want this record to come back. I can see the city carving this out. When Mr. Flynn, when we say on behalf of the Stigmatines that we're not challenging the validity of the taking, all we mean is that we didn't put this case in suit and put validity before the court. Not that we're admitting to count one.
I understand that, yes. I took it in that context as well, that's fine.
Respectfully, just one quick sentence.
Yes.
Their proposal is absolutely not acceptable to have the relocation issues bumped out to August. It's the exact same actions we continue to see. The MSBA deadline that we need to have followed is a June 29th deadline. So that proposal, again, is evidence of exactly what has been happening throughout the entire case.
All right, and I do understand both positions on that, and I think both sides have articulated it very well. All right, so here's what I'm going to propose to do. I want to prioritize things appropriately. If we don't need to rush, we won't. If we do need to get things done in a very timely way, we will. So I can make an order about reasonable access today by the end of the day that I can have Ms. Newman get to both parties. And then the other matters that do not deal with reasonable access, I can deal with by the end of, within about 2 weeks. So the rest of the decisions on the order would come in about 2 weeks other than reasonable access, which will come today. Is that acceptable in terms of timing to both sides?
Yes, sure.
Okay, all right, let's do that. The next thing I want to talk about is the timing of the motion for summary judgment. And so I understand by what's been filed, even though the court doesn't have it, that a motion for summary judgment has been filed.
It's been served.
Okay, all right. And what was the date of service?
It was handed to me yesterday.
I see, okay, all right. All right, and how much, I see how much time you're seeking, and I think that's not going to work just in light of all the deadlines in the case. But what I'm wondering is if you need a very, very short extension, I can consider it, but I don't think it's going to be as long as you're requesting out of the right.
All I'm asking is to stick with the tracking order.
Well, the tracking order is the very last date that things have to be done, which does not deal with, once the motion for summary judgment is filed, how much time a party has to respond to it.
Fair enough, Your Honor. What I mean by that is the discovery deadline. The tracking order date for the end of discovery. I'm entitled to conduct discovery right up until that deadline. I've been waiting 6 months for documents from the city clerk, a freedom of information request, which is I got a drive handed to me, or FedEx to me overnight the last time we were here, before yesterday, that is. There's 5,000 to 7,000 emails on that. City councilors, the mayor, everybody else under the sun. My intention is to depose people, perhaps depose Mr. McParland. It's going to take me time to go through those. I had to wait 6 months for them, and I can't decide who to depose until I finish going through them. And I'm entitled to notice depositions right through the end of June.
Yes, I'll hear that.
If I may, Your Honor, and they're attached as exhibits, what is being left out is
There were thousands, and there's an affidavit from the office manager, there
remember
were
that.
thousands of documents that were, they got three drives, and there was a box full of, and I attached a picture of it.
Yes.
Thousands of documents that were provided to, I mean, admittedly, Attorney Flynn's office was not involved until July of 2018, but their co-counsel has had that opportunity since October of 2017.
Okay, and I see that this is the affidavit of Karen Rowland, who's been an office manager for City of Waltham Law Department, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and so it looks like these materials were provided prior to the time that you came on the case.
Different set of materials, Your Honor. I did a Freedom of Information Act request seeking, among other things, emails among city councilors. If I could find the list here, Your Honor, one thing that certainly wasn't provided to Mr. Patton or was ever requested, documentation that might be able to support what we think is violation of open meeting laws, among other things. We believe there have been multiple misrepresentations to get into executive session, multiple misrepresentations in the executive session. There's been improper funding of this project. That $18 million was appropriated for a purchase. You cannot then take by eminent domain using that same appropriation. The number changed, the appraisal number changed, different numbers have been floated different times by different people, and I'm entitled to see all this communication and then depose the people involved, Your Honor. We never denied having access to those documents. I'm not sure why the affidavit ever came in. We've never denied any of that. That box was made available long ago. It was put onto another drive, it's been sent to me. This has nothing to do with that.
As Moscow Redevelopment dispatchers say, all of this not only is irrelevant, it can't be admitted at trial. Him talking about what 2 or 3 other city officials might have talked about years ago. There was a taking by a city council that was differently comprised than the first one in July of 2018. The Moscow versus Boston redevelopment case, when Your Honor has already ruled in it, quashing the mayor's subpoena, basically says, none of this is admissible. You can't do this with all these public city officials. What he's looking for is basically saying information that is not material, that would not be admissible at trial, he should be given extra time to go through. There is no purpose for it, Your Honor, based on Your Honor's prior ruling. And that was in the motion that I had for enforcement. I touch on all those issues. Those issues, the statute of limitations on open meeting law violations, on any certiorari questions relating to anything, has long gone by, given the areas that he wants to go into that are years ago.
Okay, so what I will do, I do remember reading all of this and not yet ruling on it. So what I will do is I'm going to go back, take everything into consideration, make rulings on that. At this point, let's...
Your Honor, would it assist you to see the actual summary judgment motion? It presents so that you can see that the issues are not related to the discovery that are argued. There are a lot of jurisdictional issues with respect to compulsory counterclaims that should have been brought. Any proceeding, if the discovery is trying to get at errors in the proceedings, that's a jurisdictional bar at this point.
Right, not yet, but thank you for the offer, I appreciate it.
That's
Let's
one
just-
example, Judge, of the discovery I'm looking for. I have 2 months left in discovery, no matter what I want to discover.
So let's do this. That one will come up. I'm just looking at dates in May just so that you can plan. And I do think that you have some of the material that you need. You may not have all of the material, or you may. I don't know at this point. But I am going to rule on those 2 issues no later than May 17th. And so what I will tell you is, I believe you have 21 days plus 3 days from the date of receipt on May 1st. In no event will you need to respond earlier than May 31st. But I will decide by May 17th and maybe a few days before exactly when that'll be. Okay. All right, everything else is taken under advisement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you.
All right, please, we'll be in recess.